I'm getting remarried to this person.
3 days after our divorce, my ex-husband showed up at my parents' house with his new fiancée to announce their marriage. He probably wanted to see my upset face. As he proudly looked at me, his eyes gleaming with triumph, he said,
As you can see, she's incredibly beautiful. Not only that, she's kind and has a calm demeanor. Her dad is a company president, so she comes from a distinguished family. She's the perfect wife.
I couldn't care less about my ex-husband's new partner, but I was curious about the type of woman who would accompany him to his ex-wife's family home. When I looked at her, she slightly lifted the hat she had been wearing deep over her eyes, and our eyes met. I was surprised to recognize her face. I froze for a moment, but then I burst into laughter, holding my stomach. I'm Evelyn, a 40-year-old working in IT. My husband, Daniel, was the same age as me. Daniel and I had been close since high school. In our senior year, Daniel and I were in the same class. He was a cheerful guy, always involved in some role during school festivals and sports events. He was also the captain of the soccer team and was popular among both boys and girls. On the other hand, I was not the type to actively participate in events and preferred reading books, being a shy person. Despite our differences, we ended up attending the same college and were in the same department. He said to me,
You're Evelyn, right? We're at the same university. Do you live nearby? What department are you in? Have you made any friends?
As I never had male friends before, I was overwhelmed by him and fell silent. But he kept talking to me, and gradually I was able to converse with him, and we naturally became close. Daniel has always been a bit naive. For example,
I've been scouted. I'm thinking of joining an agency.
When he told me this, I checked the business card he had, and it was a suspicious-looking agency. When I asked, Are you sure about this agency? I can't find it anywhere online, he said.
It's fine, but they're asking for a $5,000 joining fee, and I don't have that kind of money.
He was on the verge of falling for an obvious scam. As a serious person, I couldn't leave him alone, and as I took care of him, he said,
I can't live without you, Evelyn, the responsible one.
That's when I started thinking I couldn't leave him alone either, and we began dating. Once we started dating, I found his earnest, though somewhat misguided, efforts endearing. Perhaps it was my maternal instincts. After we both graduated from college, we landed jobs at separate companies. I was always the responsible one, and Daniel had a younger brother like charm. Maybe it was our compatible personalities, but our relationship went smoothly, leading us naturally to marriage. We were happy. My husband worked hard and helped with the household chores. We got along great. In the midst of this happiness, we received some wonderful news. I was pregnant. I hoped the pregnancy would make my husband a bit more manly and reliable, but...
Isn't dinner ready yet?
I'm feeling a bit nauseous due to morning sickness. Maybe we can order takeout today.
Ugh, takeout. Just wait until you feel better and cook something.
He showed no consideration for me, a pregnant woman. Moreover, as my pregnancy progressed and my belly began to grow, he frequently made tactless comments like,
You've really gained weight, huh? You look like a sumo wrestler.
Although I was often irritated by my husband, I made sure to visit my parents' house for breaks and avoid stress for the sake of our unborn child. Eventually, after a long pregnancy, I safely gave birth to a girl. We named her Stella. Although being a first-time parent was challenging and full of unknowns, I cherished the time spent with my daughter and husband. A year after Stella's birth, my maternity leave ended, and I returned to work. Originally, I worked full-time, but balancing work and childcare was physically and mentally more challenging than I anticipated. Eventually, after discussing with my husband and colleagues, I switched to part-time work. With my shift to part-time, my husband's sloppiness escalated.
The bath isn't ready yet.
Just heat up the bath yourself.
What's the big deal? You're working part-time now. You must have some free time, right?
And so on. When I was preparing dinner and Stella suddenly started crying, Hey Daniel, I can't leave the stove right now. Can you check on Stella, maybe change her diaper? When I asked him to.
No way, no way. I absolutely can't change a diaper. It's too gross,
he would exclaim. The days of parenting alone were tough, but I had become accustomed to the situation. Before I knew it, 8 years had passed. Stella was now 8 years old and less dependent, so I planned to focus more on my career. Just as I was gearing up for this new phase, my husband suddenly declared,
"I'm going to quit my job."
"What? Just when Stella is growing up and it's our time to shine, you're saying this all of a sudden?"
"I want to be something more than just an ordinary full-time employee."
He would exclaim something like that. Sometimes my husband would do things that surprised everyone, and I jokingly referred to these as his episodes. When he talked about quitting his job, I thought it was just another one of his strange episodes and watched to see what would happen. However, his enthusiasm for changing jobs didn't wane. Eventually, without consulting me, he said,
"I found a new job and quit the old one. I start in 2 days."
I was ready to stop him if he was getting into something dubious, but it turned out to be a legitimate company, so I felt relieved. However, his episodes became even more frequent after joining the new company.
"The current president of my company is in his 30s, so young. One day I'll take over his position."
And he would also say things like,
"From now on, I'm going to be a president. You should respect me."
He would start saying things like that. My daughter and I were just dumbfounded by his behavior. If only it had stopped there, but his words and attitude worsened.
"You look older now. The girls at work are all young and cute."
"What? You're getting older too, right? Everyone ages. It's natural."
"True, but can't you try to be a bit more stylish? Look at this woman. She has 2 kids, yet she's still gorgeous."
He showed me a photo of a popular Instagrammer. I couldn't help but feel annoyed at being compared to such a person. Not to brag, but I thought I was pretty well put together for a 40-year-old who had a child. He dumps all the housework and childcare on me, and then he's all about young girls, cute girls. It's truly exasperating. Then my husband started working late, often not coming home until well after his usual time. "You've been coming home late recently."
"Is that so? It's just as usual."
"No, it's clearly later than usual. And for some reason, he was always particularly late on Tuesdays and Fridays, never coming home before 10 p.m. "Why are you always late on Tuesdays and Fridays?" When I asked, he suddenly became flustered.
"It's for a project. We only have meetings for it on Tuesdays and Fridays. What, you think I'm lying?"
His tone became harsh. He seemed quite agitated. "Okay, I understand." Saying just that, my husband showed a relieved expression, as if a weight had been lifted off his chest. Suspicious. It had always been like this since we were dating. When he lied or felt guilty about something, he would inevitably start talking fast and become angry. It was easy to tell when my husband's behavior changed. Thinking this, I decided to take action immediately. First, I checked his mobile phone while he was in the bath. I had an idea about his password. When I tried the password I suspected, the phone unlocked, just as I thought. Looking through his phone, I found a trove of evidence of infidelity. In the messages, "Are you free this Friday?
"I'm happy. I can't wait to see you."
Aren't you worried about your wife?"
"She's so clueless, she won't notice. Totally fine."
I found conversations like that. There were also many affectionate photos of the two of them in the camera folder. The other woman appeared to be a junior colleague from his company. Trembling with anger, I transferred all the evidence to my own phone. With ample evidence gathered, I finally confronted my husband's behavior with the divorce proposal. At first, he was quite shaken and kept denying it, but when I showed him the evidence, he turned pale and couldn't find a way out.
"I'm sorry. Please don't divorce me."
"Weren't you cold and cheating because you wanted to divorce me?"
"No, it's not like that. It was just a momentary lapse. I don't want to leave you or Stella. Please."
I was filled with hatred and couldn't forgive my husband for his betrayal, but I couldn't make the decision to divorce thinking of our 8-year-old daughter. In the end, I demanded $7,000 as a settlement from the other woman and, on the condition that he completely cuts ties with her, decided against the divorce. The woman paid the amount in full without delay. Perhaps feeling awkward about having an affair with a colleague, she resigned from the company. For about 6 months, my husband seemed genuinely remorseful, but after a year, he returned to verbally abusing me as before. I couldn't forgive my husband for the affair and constant belittlement, and my feelings for him completely cooled. The reason we didn't divorce was because of our precious daughter. It seemed that my husband also cared deeply for her. He had always refused whenever I brought up divorce, but then, a week ago, he was the one who brought up the idea of divorce.
Let's get divorced.
What?
I've made up my mind. Let's divorce.
Our marriage hasn't been great, but you've always refused divorce. Why now? It's not that I didn't want to divorce. I was genuinely puzzled. I also thought that divorcing was the best thing for both of us, but my husband had been refusing it. And there were many chances to divorce before, so why now, I wondered.
It's your fault. Ever since I cheated, you've changed. You never forgave me, no matter how many years passed. That's why I'm fed up.
He claimed the divorce was my fault. True, I hadn't forgiven him since that day. But my anger wasn't just about the affair. Sure, I still can't forgive you for the affair. But more than that, you've been verbally abusing me ever since. That's what I'm angry about.
No, I say those things for your benefit. As a woman, you need to take care of the house properly. You need to maintain your beauty. You've been neglecting these efforts, so I was just pointing it out. That's why we're getting divorced. It's not my fault.
From his response, I realized he still didn't think he was at fault. The idea of a woman needing to be a certain way was repulsive. I repeatedly told him he was also responsible, but he wouldn't listen. Eventually, he insisted.
It's not my fault. Understand that. So there won't be any alimony or distribution of property. Remember that.
He emphasized this point. Ah, I see. He was determined to be the one initiating the divorce and insistently claimed it was my fault. Something was off with him, suddenly suggesting divorce. I immediately thought he must be having another affair. As always, he was easy to read. He started talking fast and showing irritation just like before. In the past, I would have pressed him to find out why he suddenly wanted a divorce, but I no longer had that much interest in him. Okay, I agree, let's get divorced. As you said, no need for alimony or property division, but I won't give up custody of our daughter.
All right, that's fine.
He had always said how important our daughter was to him, yet he behaved like this. I was utterly disgusted. Soon after, I proceeded with the divorce proceedings, and we were officially divorced. I took my daughter and returned to my parents' house to live with them. My daughter didn't object to the divorce and wanted to come with me, saying, Dad is hardly ever home, and he's mean to Mom. It's okay if we're apart. I just want Mom to be happy. She told me this with such kindness. I was planning to start a new life with my daughter and my parents, but just 3 days after the divorce, an event occurred that seemed like an immediate disturbance. One day when I returned home from work, I saw Daniel and a blonde woman with long hair in front of the house. The woman was wearing a deep hat, and her face was not clearly visible. I had a bad feeling. I wanted to ignore them if possible. But since they were in front of my parents' house, I couldn't just leave them there. As I approached them, Daniel came towards me with a smug smile. What do you want? I cautiously asked my ex-husband.
I remarried this woman,
he said, his eyes shining with triumph. Remarried just 3 days after our divorce? It must have overlapped with our marriage. And to come and boast about it so loudly? What kind of nerve? I thought maybe he was having another one of his weird episodes and felt disgusted. I wondered if my ex-husband was starting another one of his weird episodes, which was quite irritating. I was blatantly showing my displeasure, but Daniel seemed so engrossed in his own story that he didn't seem to notice. He started talking about his new wife, even though I hadn't asked him to.
Just look. She's incredibly beautiful, kind, gentle, and apparently her dad is a CEO, so she's from a prestigious family. She's the perfect wife,
he boasted. I couldn't care less about Daniel's new wife, but I wondered what kind of woman would follow him to his ex's family home. Then the woman slightly lifted her hat, and our eyes met. I was surprised to recognize her and froze for a moment. The woman saw my face, and her face turned pale. I couldn't help but to burst into laughter. Stop it! It's too funny.
What are you laughing at?
Because I know this woman well. The convenient man you talked about was Daniel, huh? As I said this, Daniel casually said,
What? You two know each other? It's a small world, isn't it?
He seemed impressed by the coincidence. However, upon seeing me, the woman started to try to escape. Daniel, I'm feeling unwell. Can we go home now? She was Grace, and she seemed desperate to leave the place, but Daniel stopped her.
Grace, what's wrong all of a sudden? I had no idea you knew Evelyn.
He said, laughing. Grace was shaking Daniel's arm, saying, Can we stop, please? We should go home. But my ex-husband showed no sign of leaving.
What kind of acquaintance are you?
He asked me, so I explained. Grace used to be my colleague at the company. We had worked together for 7 years. As I explained my relationship with Grace, she seemed very agitated and uncomfortable. But Daniel, oblivious to Grace's state, kept talking about how perfect she was. Daniel kept saying that Grace is a 29-year-old beauty who graduated from a prestigious university, has a calmer and kinder temperament than me. Furthermore, he repeatedly mentioned that she's a great cook, a CEO's daughter, and the perfect wife.
Good thing I divorced you. Sorry I got all the happiness, huh?
He said sarcastically. Wow, she sounds amazing, I replied, but I couldn't stop grinning. Daniel was getting irritated seeing me not crying or showing regret, just grinning.
Why are you laughing? You should be more upset. Cry and wail. Or is it because my new wife is so perfect that you're speechless?
Ah, I see. He came to show off his new wife, probably wanting to see me upset, but I felt neither envy nor regret. I had no feelings for my ex-husband anymore, and I didn't care where or with whom he remarried. The fact that his new wife was Grace was just too funny. Seeing Grace turn pale, I decided it was time to reveal her true identity to Daniel. Sorry. I was just surprised that you married Grace.
I guess Grace was famous at your company too, huh? For being beautiful and high spec? A woman like that marrying me, of course, you're shocked.
Yes, she was famous, I said. Then Grace glared at me fiercely and said,
Don't say anything unnecessary.
She looked at me with such an expression. Grace, you said you were having an affair with a married man before you left the company, but I'm shocked it was Daniel.
Grace, that's not good. You can't just go around talking about affairs.
Daniel was momentarily taken aback when his affair before our divorce came to light, but he quickly became defiant. Typical of my foolish husband. He seemed to be under the mistaken impression that he couldn't be sued for alimony since we were already divorced. Since Daniel seemed to be so enamored with Grace, I decided to tell him more about her. Grace was promoted quickly at the company, maybe because she was involved with the CEO.
Hey.
When was it? You said loudly during lunch break that all men are just wallets, right? It's easy to hook them by selling your body?
What?
You were basically sleeping around with the bosses for promotions and money, right? You were known as a bitch among the employees, weren't you?
That's a lie. You must be mistaken.
Right, but getting involved with the CEO was a mistake. His wife found out about the affair and demanded a huge settlement. Eventually, you were fired by the CEO's wife's decision, right?
Stop it. Don't just make things up. It's not true, Daniel. She's just saying this because she's jealous of us.
Grace was desperately trying to convince Daniel. Then, can you call this a lie? I showed them photos on my mobile phone. The photo showed Grace when she was drunk. It was a video from a karaoke session at the second part of the company's year-end party.
Men are all just wallets. Just buy ready-made meals and plate them, and they'll think you're a great cook. Just take off a little, and they'll pay right away. I can even pay off my debts with this.
Grace, holding the mic and having a blast. I wonder where her calm personality went.
Grace, were all the meals you cooked just ready-made dishes? And what about these debts?
Yes, Grace had a lot of debt. Debts from her affairs with married men. A panicking Daniel asked Grace for an explanation, but she fell silent. And Grace, you're not 29, you're 38. You're 2 years younger than me. Grace had also lied about her age. Indeed, she looked pretty and young, thanks to the money from men used for Botox and plastic surgery. But claiming to be 29 was too much. I couldn't help but laugh at Daniel's lack of judgment in women. Ah, and she's not a CEO's daughter. Grace's dad works in a factory.
So that's why she never introduced her family to me. It's all lies. Grace, is there anything true in what you said?
Daniel, red with anger, confronted Grace. I'm sorry. It's impressive how she piled up so many lies. Daniel, too, is questionable for not noticing any of it. Typical of him. He must have judged solely based on youth and beauty, never really seeing what's inside. That's the kind of person he is. He was in shock to learn that the perfect Grace he thought he knew was all lies. Daniel and Grace had met about 6 months ago, with her saying, I found a good man, even though he's married. They met at a bar where people sit together randomly. I wonder about my ex-husband going to such places while married. Grace targeted my ex-husband because he had told her,
I work for a major company and have a good salary.
Hearing this, Grace saw Daniel as a good catch. Even though she knew he was married, seeing the ring on his left ring finger, she must have thought she could pay off her debts with Daniel's money. Before long, Daniel started saying he wanted to divorce his wife and remarry Grace, believing that if they divorced now, he wouldn't have to pay alimony, and with his income, they could live well. So she decided to marry him. Daniel decided to leave his beloved daughter for the younger Grace, thinking he could have more children with her. Daniel, looking at the apologetic Grace with contempt, said,
It's impossible after so many lies. It's just impossible.
He shouted that. I wondered which face he was talking with. It wasn't just Grace who had been lying. Daniel, you don't work for a major company, do you? And you're earning more than me? Good one. You earn less than me.
That's
a flustered ex-husband. Knowing Daniel's lies, Grace became furious. What? You're kidding me. I married you thinking you were rich. What a letdown. She pushed him angrily.
Ow!
Daniel, stunned and trembling, watched as Grace transformed. He loved the young, beautiful, good-looking CEO's daughter, Grace, and she loved the rich Daniel. All their lies came to light, and their relationships seemed to crumble. I couldn't believe I had married such a terrible man, but at the same time, I was glad I divorced. The two liars were perfect for each other. I told them I couldn't deal with them anymore and just mentioned claiming the divorce settlement before going inside. Then,
You can't claim a divorce settlement for me. We're already divorced.
He blurted out something foolish. Oh, please. Even if you know about the infidelity within 3 years of divorce, you can still claim alimony. Go check it out yourself. And thanks for coming here and telling me about your infidelity. I wouldn't have known otherwise. Their faces turned pale upon hearing this. I'll discuss the future through a lawyer. I finally entered the house. The two continued arguing loudly outside and were eventually taken away by the police for causing a disturbance. Later, I received the alimony through a lawyer. The moneyless couple borrowed to pay me in full. I was relieved to cut ties with such terrible people. I heard later that Daniel filed for divorce mediation with Grace. He had to borrow for the mediation costs, and now he's probably drowning in debt. Daniel and Grace were both in debt and in the middle of a messy legal battle. As for me, I vowed to be happy for my daughter's sake.